At my graduation dinner, my stepmother handed her phone to a waiter and said, "Can we get one with just the real family?" Then she pulled my half-brother beside her and left me standing in my cap and honors cords. 3 weeks later, after I accepted my first software job, that same brother slid his laptop toward me and asked me to rewrite his portfolio and let him present one of my old projects as his own. My stepmother said I owed them for letting me live in my father's house. That was the moment I finally stopped asking what would make me family. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The waiter looked at me, then at my stepmother, Diane, like he was hoping one of us would correct her. My half-brother, Caleb, stared down at the table. He did not look surprised. That was almost worse. I stepped away from the group before anyone had to ask me twice. The picture took maybe 3 seconds. Diane smiled with one hand on Caleb's shoulder. My father's empty place in our family was not visible in the frame, but I felt it anyway. When they sat back down, Diane gave me a small laugh and said, "You know what I meant. I just wanted one of Caleb and me." She could have said that the first time. She had not. I said, "Sure," because the restaurant was crowded, my graduation cap was already digging into my forehead, and I could feel myself getting dangerously close to crying in front of everyone. Caleb changed the subject to dessert. That had always been his way of handling anything uncomfortable. He did not usually start the cruelty. He just accepted whatever benefited him and waited for the room to move on. I was 22, had graduated with highest honors in computer science, and had spent 4 years balancing scholarships, a campus job, and late nights with my laptop. Diane told relatives that computer science was mostly typing. When Caleb finished a short online program in web development, she threw him a cookout and ordered a cake with a little laptop printed on it. I noticed the difference. I trained myself not to react. My father had died during my junior year after a fast, ugly illness that turned our house into a place full of medication schedules and whispered conversations. After he died, I could have moved into student housing, but Diane said I could stay until graduation. I told myself that meant she still considered me her daughter in some way. The truth was more complicated. I paid for my own school costs. I bought groceries when I could and covered the internet bill because I needed reliable service for class. Diane was not supporting me completely, but she was giving me a room and I was grateful for it. I was also scared. My mother had died when I was little. My father was gone. Diane and Caleb were the only people left who had lived in the same house with me long enough to know what cereal I hated and which side of the couch I always sat on. I kept thinking that if I stayed easy to live with, useful and undemanding, eventually that shared history would become real belonging. The graduation picture should have ended that belief. It did not immediately. I went home that night, hung my honors cords over the back of my desk chair, and answered Diane normally when she asked whether I wanted leftovers put in the refrigerator. Then I lay awake until almost 3 in the morning, replaying her words and trying to soften them. Maybe she had meant biological family. Maybe grief had made her protective of Caleb. Maybe she had been thinking about a mother and son picture and had said it badly. I had years of practice building better explanations for her than she built for herself. A few days later, I received a job offer from a mid-sized health software company. I would be a junior software engineer working on internal tools, with a normal salary, benefits, and plenty to learn. It was exactly what I wanted. When I told Diane, she said, "That's good. At least you found something stable." Then she asked whether the company was hiring for Caleb. He had been applying for entry-level developer and technical support roles for a few months. He knew some front-end development and had built several small websites, but his portfolio was thin. There was nothing shameful about that. Everyone starts somewhere. The problem was that Caleb did not want to start where he actually was. 3 weeks after graduation, he came into the kitchen while I was eating cereal and put his laptop beside my bowl. "Can you look at something?" He asked. His portfolio was open. The design was clean, but most of the project descriptions were vague. One was a restaurant landing page. One was a weather app based on a tutorial. The third section was blank. I told him the first 2 descriptions needed to explain what he had personally built and what problems he had solved. He nodded like he was taking my advice seriously. Then he said, "I was thinking you could just write that part." I asked what part. All the technical stuff, you know how to make it sound right. I said I could give him general feedback, but I was not going to write his portfolio for him. He leaned against the counter and exhaled through his nose. Okay, then what about Study Bridge? Study Bridge was my senior capstone project, a web application that helped students find open tutoring sessions by subject and schedule. It was not revolutionary. It had bugs. The design was better by the end than it had been at the start, but there were still things I would rebuild differently now. It was also mine. I had created the original version, written most of the back end, handled deployment, and maintained the public repository. 2 classmates later helped with testing and interface work, and all 3 of us were credited on the final university showcase page. Caleb had seen me working on it at home. Once, he suggested changing the color of a button. That was the full extent of his involvement. He turned his laptop so I could see a mock-up. He had taken screenshots from my project and placed them in his portfolio under a heading that said Collaborative Scheduling Platform. I stared at it and asked, "Why is that on your page?" He said, "Because I helped with it." "No, you didn't. I gave you feedback. You told me the green button looked weird. That is still feedback." I thought he was joking, then I saw the expression on his face. He was embarrassed, but he was also waiting for me to make the embarrassment go away by agreeing with him. I told him to remove it. That was when Diane walked in. She had heard enough from the hallway to understand the argument. She looked at the screen, then at me, and said, "Would it really hurt you?" I said, "It could hurt both of us. He did not work on that project." "He is not claiming he invented the internet," she said. "He just needs something strong enough to get an interview." Caleb added, "I can learn it before they ask me anything." I asked him how he planned to explain a project he had not built. He said, "That is why I need you to write the technical section." The honesty of that answer stunned me more than a complicated lie would have. I closed his laptop and slid it away from my cereal. "No," Diane's face changed. She said I was being selfish. She reminded me that I had lived in her house after my father died. She said the family had made sacrifices so I could finish school without worrying about rent. Some of that was true. I had paid expenses, but I had not paid market rent. Diane had not forced me out during the worst year of my life. I had always been grateful for that, but gratitude was not the same as owing Caleb my work. I said, "You told a waiter I was not real family." Now I am family because Caleb needs my portfolio. Diane looked offended, as if I had brought up something private that she had done in front of an entire restaurant. That picture had nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. Caleb muttered, "Can we not make this dramatic?" That sentence almost pulled me back into my usual role, the reasonable one, the quiet one, the person who lowered the temperature so everyone else could stay comfortable. I had done that for years. I had fixed Caleb's resume before his first internship application. I had spent a whole weekend helping him recover files from a laptop he had never backed up. Every time I did something useful, Diane became warmer for a few days. She would include me in dinner plans, ask about work, or tell someone I was good with computers. I had mistaken temporary appreciation for love. I stood up and carried my bowl to the sink. I will not write his portfolio. He cannot use Study Bridge. And I am moving out. The last part surprised me as I said it. I had planned to move eventually. My job started the following month, and I had been looking at apartments with a former classmate. But until that moment, I had been telling myself I could stay a little longer, save more money, and leave without making it feel like a rejection. Diane said, "So now you are threatening us." "I am not threatening you. I am telling you what I am doing." Caleb opened his laptop again and said, "Fine, forget it." No one apologized. The conversation ended because Diane started unloading the dishwasher too loudly, and I went upstairs to make a list of what I needed to pack. Moving out was not dramatic. For 2 weeks, we avoided each other in the kitchen. I signed a lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment with a former classmate. My room barely fit a bed, a desk, and a dresser. The laundry machine's 8 quarters, and my commute was longer than I wanted. I loved it. Not every minute. I cried the first night because the room smelled unfamiliar, and because my father had never seen it. I also felt guilty leaving Diane with the full internet bill and household chores I had quietly handled for years. That guilt almost convinced me I had overreacted. Then I remembered standing outside the graduation picture while Diane smiled. On moving day, Caleb carried one box to my car. He did not mention the portfolio. At the curb, he said, "Mom thinks you are doing this to punish her." I said, "I am doing it because I need my own space." He looked toward the house. "You know she says things badly." That was the closest he came to acknowledging what had happened. I asked, "Do you think I am part of the family?" He took too long to answer. Finally, he said, "You are my sister." I wanted that to be enough, but he had said it while still expecting access to something I had clearly refused to give him. I thanked him for carrying the box and left. My new job started a few weeks later. I had graduated at the top of my class, but I still needed help understanding the company's systems. I even broke a test environment once and had to ask another engineer to help me fix it. No one treated me like a genius or a fraud. I was a new employee learning the job. That reminded me that starting honestly was not humiliating. Caleb could have presented the projects he actually had and applied for roles that matched his skills. About 6 weeks after I moved out, I received an email from Professor Bennett, who had supervised the capstone showcase. His message was brief. He said a recruiter from a local technology consulting company had contacted him to verify Caleb's role in Study Bridge. The recruiter had found the university showcase page, which listed my classmates and me, but Caleb's application described him as a contributing developer. Professor Bennett asked whether Caleb had worked on an earlier version that was not reflected in the project credits. My stomach dropped. I read the email 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood it. Then I opened Caleb's public portfolio. He had removed the full Study Bridge name, but the screenshots were still there. He had rewritten the description to say he had contributed to a scheduling platform used in an academic environment. He listed database design, user authentication, and deployment among his responsibilities. Those were the parts I had done. For several minutes, I sat at my desk feeling the old instinct return. I could call Caleb first. I could warn him. I could tell Professor Bennett there had been a misunderstanding and give Caleb time to remove the page. That would preserve his interview. It might also preserve peace with Diane. It would require me to become useful again. I did not want to ruin his life. I did not even want him to lose the job. I wanted him to stop using my work, so I answered only what I had been asked. I wrote that Caleb had not participated in the project, was not part of the original or final development team, and did not have permission to present my work as his own. I added that the public repository and showcase credits accurately listed the contributors. I did not attach a long accusation. I did not contact the company myself. I did not post about it online. I told the truth and went back to work, although I did not get much done for the next hour. Caleb called that evening. He did not say hello. "Did you email my interviewer?" "No, Professor Bennett emailed me. You could have called me. I already told you not to use the project. That was months ago. It was 6 weeks ago. He said the description did not claim he built everything." I read his own list of responsibilities back to him. He went quiet. Then he said, "I was going to tell them it was a family project." I said, "It was not a family project." He accused me of caring more about credit than about whether he could get a job. That hurt because it was close to the argument Diane had trained both of us to believe. My success was treated as a family resource. My boundaries were treated as selfishness. I asked him one question. If you got hired because they believed you built it, when were you planning to correct them? He did not answer. The company ended his candidacy for that role. I learned that from him, not from the recruiter. According to Caleb, they gave him a chance to explain the discrepancy, and he said he had overstated his involvement because he was nervous and needed stronger experience. They told him they were not moving forward. That was the consequence. He lost one opportunity. He was not blacklisted. No one announced his name across the industry. His online profile stayed up. He continued applying for jobs. Diane called me the next morning and said I had betrayed my brother. I told her I had answered a direct question honestly. She said, "You could have protected him." I said, "From what he chose to write." She told me family members did not expose each other's mistakes to strangers. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. "You did not call me family when you wanted the picture," I said. She replied, "I apologized for that." She had not. When I pointed that out, she said, "I told you that you misunderstood." That was as far as the conversation got. She started crying, then became angry that I was not comforting her. I ended the call after telling her I would not discuss Caleb's applications with her again. The family reaction was mixed. My father's sister said Caleb had put me in an impossible position. One cousin thought I should have warned him before answering the professor. An uncle said employers expected candidates to exaggerate a little. My grandmother asked why I could not have let Caleb use the project until he had enough experience to replace it. A few relatives avoided the subject completely. For a while, every opinion made me question myself. I kept returning to the same fact. I had warned him before he used it. He had not made a careless mistake in a rushed application. He had taken my refusal, adjusted the wording, and submitted it anyway. Still, I had to admit something about my own part in the family pattern. For years, I had acted as if silence were kindness. When Diane minimized my accomplishments, I told myself correcting her would look arrogant. When she praised Caleb for things she ignored in me, I pretended not to notice. When he expected help, I usually gave it before he had to ask twice. I thought I was protecting the little family I had left. What I was really doing was teaching them that excluding me had no cost, because I would still show up with whatever they needed. That realization did not make me feel powerful. It made me embarrassed. I wished I had spoken sooner, when the stakes were lower and the resentment was smaller. I wished my first real boundary had not arrived in the middle of Caleb's job search. But waiting longer would not have made the boundary kinder. It would only have made it later. Caleb and I did not speak for nearly 3 months. Then he texted me a link to a small project he had built himself. It was an inventory tracker for a friend's landscaping business. The interface was rough, and one page loaded slowly, but it worked. He wrote, "This one is actually mine." I could not tell whether that was an apology, a jab, or both. I replied, "It looks like a solid project. Make sure you explain what you built and what you would improve." I did not rewrite the description. A few weeks later, he got a technical support job at a different company. It was not the developer position he had wanted, but it gave him relevant experience. Diane told relatives he had succeeded despite a setback caused by family conflict. Some of them probably still believe that version. Diane and I have limited contact now. We speak on birthdays. I meet her and Caleb for lunch occasionally, usually in public, where conversations are easier to end. She has never given me a complete apology. The closest she came was last winter when she said, "I should not have used the words real family at your graduation, but you know I was emotional, and I did raise you for a long time." I told her I appreciated the first sentence. She immediately started explaining the second. I no longer argue her into understanding me. That was another kind of unpaid work. There are moments when I miss the house. I miss my father's old coffee mug in the cabinet, and the mark on the hallway wall where he measured Caleb and me as kids. I even miss ordinary evenings when Diane watched television too loudly and Caleb left cabinet doors open. Distance does not erase attachment. It just keeps attachment from deciding everything. At my company, I still use StudyBridge as an example when someone asks about my school experience. I describe what my classmates contributed, what I built, and what I learned from the parts that failed. It feels simple now. Credit does not have to be a weapon. It just has to be accurate. Last month, Diane mailed me a printed copy of the graduation picture, not the one with only her and Caleb. A different one, taken earlier that evening, with all 3 of us standing together. She wrote on the back, "I thought you might want a family photo. I put it in a drawer. I have not thrown it away and I have not framed it. Maybe that is where the relationship is now, not erased, not repaired. Just kept at a distance, where nobody gets to remove me from the picture and still claim everything I can do."